Okay, David Hart here from the G4 Guitar Teacher Network. What we're going to do here is another open discussion about various topics, whatever comes up. There's no agenda here. We don't have any particular topics that we're going to cover. We're just going to run through questions and ask the teachers. I do have things that I can talk about as always. But first of all, what I'll do is, does anyone have a question? If you've got a question, let me know now and we'll jump straight into it. No questions? Okay, all right, all good. Don't be shy, guys. This is your chance. This is your opportunity to talk about those tough topics. So what we'll do, I've just pulled a couple of things here that have been coming up a lot and recurring, and they're not necessarily things that we haven't talked about before, but it's always good to sort of work on the harder problems and the ones that are going to keep recurring. And so the first thing I'm going to talk about here is based on a topic that I posted a video up today, which I think is very relevant to a lot of what we're doing, not just from the point of view of the teaching, but also for you as a teacher and in business. And that was the video of the lady who was talking about, she did a university study on talking about developing grit and the idea that in success in most things, which I'm very aware of, and I think you guys are probably aware of as well, because the thing that really makes us all similar is that we're not beginner guitar players anymore. We already know what it was like to go through that, and that experience is something that we need to draw on, and we need to sort of look at why are we the less than 1%, and that's reality. Why are we the less than 1% who took up guitar whatever age you were? For me, it was a teenager. But why is it that we stuck with it, whereas the other 99% or more gave up? And if you think about it, I don't know about you guys, but I certainly wasn't the next big thing. I wasn't a natural guitar player in any way, shape or form. I remember quite distinctly at age 14, 15 coming across these guys who were just like, wow, amazing, and they'd been playing since they were like 3 and 4, and I just thought that they were much more naturally talented, and they just had all these gifts that I would never have. And that went on for some years, really into my 20s. And what I found was that it was through really researching and understanding and really not being satisfied with the fact that I couldn't be as good as I would want to be, that these guys were natural. And so what I started to see was signs, not just through music, but through other things as well, of guys who had really stuck it out. And you notice this, probably you guys are aware of it, but you notice that in high school there are certain people who are really doing well at certain things, and then you sort of meet them later in their 20s and you find out that they're no longer doing it, or they're no longer passionate about it, or whatever it was. And an example that I use is there was a guy who was I was a swimmer at school, and this guy was the state champion. He broke all the records and even went to the nationals as a 14, 15-year-old, and I just saw this guy was headed for the Olympics. There was no doubt about it. And I came across him in my 20s at a pool, of all places, and he was overweight. He was not looking terribly good, and I had a chat to him. I said, man, you used to be amazing. What happened? Not trying to put you down, but you were destined to be doing great things. And he said, oh, I just got sick of it. He said, I sort of got to about 17 and I just didn't want to do it anymore. I just didn't have the passion or the drive to go any further. So it was really his father or mother or someone who, as a teenager, who was probably backing him, but he didn't have that, whatever it was, to go on with it. And what I think that really struck here with this video of what this lady's talking about is that thing called grit. And if I look at the things that I've achieved myself, and I'm sure you guys can relate in the things that you've done, it's not just guitar. It's for me, it's business. There's certain things that we've just stuck at through our lives, and they're the things that we tend to feel good about. And I can sort of relate it to another book that I read recently, which was another book I really recommend that you check out. Just let me think of the title. It's Be So Good That They Can't Ignore You is the name of the title. Be So Good That They Can't Ignore You. And the idea behind that book was that we're actually not driven by our passions, or we're not successful necessarily. Passion isn't what you should follow. The actual premise to the book and the opening part of it he talks about how following your passion is actually a bad option. And most people would think conventional kind of thinking is, you know, why would you not follow your passion? Why would you do anything else but your passion? So it sort of was at the beginning of the book is kind of hard thing to grasp. But what happened, or what you understand through the book, and this is not just the guy's opinion, he's done a lot of research on this, and you know, for years he's been doing this topic, and he found that people who actually follow their passion often didn't succeed, and people who followed a particular path, it was the opposite, where they became passionate about something they became good at. And so this is something that's really interesting, and it did really give a different twist on things, and it had me thinking differently as to, okay, I've become really passionate about teaching, but I didn't start out that way. I didn't decide to become a teacher when I was, you know, a teenager and say, this is what I'm passionate about, I really want to be a teacher. What I really wanted to do was be a guitar player. I never thought about being a teacher. It was just something that would pay the bills. But as I got better and better at it, I became more interested in it, and I became more challenged by it. That, hey, I don't want to just be average at this. You know, people say to me, oh, this guy, you know, he's a better teacher than you, or he, you know, whatever. And I'm like, he can't be better than me. I've got to find out what that guy's doing. What's his secret? And I learn all about that particular person, not just from, you know, guitar teachers, but from different coaches. And that's when I really became passionate about it. And it was really, and, you know, it probably took 10 years, but I got to that point where I really sunk my teeth into teaching guitar. So what I want to do in this, just first part of this, is just ask a couple of you, go around and find out what it is that got you into teaching. Where did you start? So perhaps if I, you know, does anyone want to speak first? So if you don't want to speak, I understand, but does anyone want to sort of jump in there and tell me, why did you start teaching? What was your reason? I'll point to someone if you don't, someone doesn't say. All right. No? Okay. I'll go for you, Fernando. Tell me why you decided to take up teaching.
All right, so hello to everyone first. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you. Can everyone else hear? Just put your hand up if you can hear him okay. I can hear you okay.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Yeah, well, for me, I mean, I've always loved playing guitar. I guess I'm a bit like you in that regard, that what I love is playing, writing music. And I got to a point in life where I wanted to do more with music. I've been doing sales for a long, long time. And as you know, I was working in sales full-time and whatnot, and I wanted to be more involved in music. I've taught a couple of times, but more informally, I guess. So to me, it was kind of a way of living the dream, I guess, of being involved with music, being able to play every day. But at the same time, I discovered that I really wanted to give other people that gift of music and be able to plant that seed on someone else, because I know what music's done for me. So I guess deep inside me, I found that motivation to do it. And now, well, I've only been doing it for 4 months, which is not a long time at all. But I'm definitely enjoying it, and I'm finding that, yeah, it's really grown inside me. It's becoming a passion more and more. So I guess that's the short story.
Yeah. Look, I think it's one of those things where you kind of, you know, when the question is thrown at you, perhaps you don't have a clear answer, and you know, often what leads us to teaching is not obvious. We sort of, when we look at it in this kind of gradual steps, you know, for some people they come out of a job, or you know, they just want to have the guitar in their hand, and you know, or someone asks them, you know, can you teach me, etc. So I understand for some of you it's a gradual, slow, step-by-step process, because it certainly was for me. It wasn't something that I just decided, you know, here I am at school, bang, I'm going to be a guitar teacher, that's my career. It never worked. I just wanted to be a guitar player, and it sort of crept up on me because it was the most reliable kind of income, and like I said, as it sort of built up and grew. So as far as the developing grit, which is what we're talking about here, and I'm going to bring it to students in a minute, is that kind of the idea of getting yourself to go the distance. So really what I want to focus on here is what are the things that are going to, do you think, that lead you to not want to continue, to lead you to have a bad day or a bad week? Why do some guys give up? And not just guitar teaching, business, whether it be guitar playing, anything. I mean, what are some of the reasons people give up? Paul Andrews, can you give me any? What are some of the things that you think are the reasons people give up?
I'd say probably paramount is not having focus, clarity, or an end goal. You end up not having kind of the where you want to head, so you end up just kind of bashing around. And that's probably the one thing with guitar playing. If you don't know exactly what you want to do, you tend to do a bit of everything, get confused, and then you end up giving up because you get overwhelmed. So I'd probably say, yeah, clarity, goal, there's three there, isn't there? And being overwhelmed is kind of all the same sort of thing, I suppose.
Okay, cool. So we can sort of bring that to the idea that they lose confidence. Is that fair enough? Just sort of, yeah, as they become overwhelmed, they start to lose confidence and whatever. And this is an area that a lot of the questions that come up, which are great, and I want you to keep asking the questions on Facebook, because it does sometimes take lots of examples for you to learn. When they talk about students who study business at Harvard University, basically what they do is they spend their 4 or 5 or 6 years, depending on how long they stay there, doing case studies. And that's really all I've done in my career as a guitar teacher, is case study after case study. Why did this student give up? Why does this student not practice? Why is this student, not doing the things that I'm asking them to do? What is it that I need to do? So it's a constant case study after case study, and that's where you build up that experience. And really, what happens to teachers, especially in the early stages, is they get very fixed on things that aren't actually the real reason. They don't see the bigger picture. What they do is that student, they actually believe literally what students say. Oh, I can't afford lessons anymore. So what they do is they go, times are tough. Yeah, I can't afford the lessons anymore. I'm really sorry, but I won't be coming anymore because cash poor. Oh, really? Okay. And then the next couple of days later, you see them shopping at designer shop, buying the latest outfit, or they're at the most expensive restaurant in your area. Hang on, were you poor? What's going on here? But it's very rarely, and I think you guys get that. Here is a case of where we've talked about this a lot of time. And if you keep buying that argument and missing the fact that what they're really saying to you is they don't see the value in the lessons. In this example. So when I started to see that, I started to go, okay, I understand this. I understand the fact that people are using it as an excuse. What kind of other excuses are they using? So an excuse like, I don't have time to practice, or I'm going to wait until after my exams, or I'm getting married in 2 years, so I've got to prepare for that. Whatever their excuses are, you know that someone who's genuinely on target with what they're doing, and this is what they do, they're not going to come up with excuses. They're going to be keen to turn up week after week. I've had good examples of it, and this is part of where I obviously learned, but where people would say something initially, and I started out as a teenager or even younger with my parents' business, and then into my 20s working in retail. So I had a lot of experience in sales, and people are always on the defensive, because what they want to do is they want to make sure that they don't get sold on something. And by always being on the defensive and being sort of, no, I'm not interested, just looking, which is a standard line if any of you have worked in retail. When people are saying that, what they're saying is, just don't sell me something. Don't come and try and do your big sales pitch on me. So when people are getting enrolling in lessons and starting with lessons, they do the same thing, and they'll often, and I found this, is they'll often have these kind of little excuses that they'll throw in early just to make sure that they're not committed. So they might say, for instance, they enroll for the 5 weeks. So look, I'm only here for the 5 weeks because I've got something after that, or and I found that this was going on, especially in the early days, where people were using these little things, and you might not even notice them, but they do very subtle little kind of get out clauses, if you like, So yeah, I'll do the 5-week course, and that'll be great. Look, I'm going away on holiday after that, or I've got a job coming up after that, or I'm going to travel, so I won't be going on beyond the 5 weeks. So they use that as the little thing as their get out clause. But what I was finding was that when and I was accepting their get out clauses, but I was also finding that a lot of them were after, because they were happy with the introduction after the 5 weeks, suddenly that get out clause had disappeared, and they weren't no longer going on their trip, or they no longer had whatever else it was that they were going to do. Their plans had changed somehow, and so I realized, hang on, this goes back, and I related it back to my sales days, and this is the same thing. This is people making sure they're saying, I'm just looking, just come here for the 5-week intro, you know, that's all I'm here for, I'm not here for any more. Just, you know, don't try and sign me up on some annual course or something that you do. I just want the intro, and I'm good after that. I've got your materials, thanks very much. So what I realized was that by really starting off early and through the introduction, or even in the inquiry phone call, finding out where they're at. So when they sort of said, oh look, you know, I'm going away in 5 weeks, so I won't be going on that, I would stop it right there and go, look, there's no point. You know, if you're only going to be here for 5 weeks, this course, you've got to commit to learning guitar. It's got to be something that you want. You know, how badly do you want to learn guitar? Because you're not going to learn it in 5 weeks. In 5 weeks, I'm going to be able to introduce you to what we do. Now, I'm not saying that you have to go beyond 5 weeks. If you don't want to go beyond 5 weeks, I totally get that. But I'm telling you that there's no point in doing my introduction if you don't have a plan to continue on. Because the idea of the introduction is to introduce you to the whole course and what I do, and then go on from there. And it was amazing how many times people would go, oh, well look, you know, it should be okay. You know, I'll work out a plan, or I'll find some way around it. So it was really a test as to whether or not they were really going to commit for the long term. And I would say to them, look, you don't, after 5 weeks, if it's not for you, it's not for you. I totally understand. So I would give them the get out clause that they wanted, while at the same time saying that, you know, this needs to be something that you do plan on doing long term, but if it's not for you for whatever reason, then that's fine as well. Okay. Now at this point, again, I've got more topics and we can go on. But if does anyone have a question? It'd be good to hear a question from someone. Anybody? Rod, are you there?
Yeah, I am here.
Okay, so Rod, you've just recently joined. So maybe if I just find out of you, what would you consider to be kind of for you a main challenge right now? What's the thing that's most on your mind about starting out?
Just getting the initial students. I'm waiting on my flyers, and so yeah, just
okay. All right. So
short term, so I don't have to go back to work day job.
Okay, excellent. So you've got a plan to get, how many students do you want to see by the end of 2015? Would you like to be teaching?
I'd like to have a minimum of probably about. I think to be viable, financially viable, I'd need about 25.
Okay, cool. All right. So we've got a target there for 25. So if you aim for 50, as they say, aim for the stars and you probably hit the moon. If you aim for 50, then and do your plan on that, you'll get to 25, no problem. So, and that's what you want to aim for, because what often happens if we aim for exactly what we want, we often come short.
I wouldn't aim for 25. That's just what I would need at minimum. I'd be aiming at as many as possible.
Okay, excellent. Okay, all right. So let's do take it even up further. So let's take it up to 100 students. So you know, and that's a lot of students to get in the first year. But if you get there, which is great. So if you aim for that 100, then what you do is you work out how many flyers you need to be doing each month, or each week, or even each day, and break it down. And that's basically the plan. Okay. So it sounds to me like you just need to get your feet wet and get out there and do the flyers, and then you'll be done. And then as you go through each stage, you'll notice that obviously the next stage is sales, and then after that it will be keeping the students, you know, and obviously teaching the G4 course. Okay, cool. All right, so let me, you know, does anyone have a question? If you have a question, go for it now, otherwise I'll continue on. All right, cool. So let's talk about parents, because this is something that has come up a lot.
David.
Yes, Ben.
I think Fernando had a question. Well, I could see it was a hand over his mic.
Thanks, Ben.
Okay, Fernando.
Yeah, I was trying to go.
just turn on your mic next time and shout.
All right, just yell. Yeah. Hey, I'm getting to a point where I want to start making groups. So I'm getting up to 10, 11 students. So I think I've got a couple that I can start putting together, and I guess get my feet wet into the whole group thing and whatnot. So start with 2, and then little by little build it up. Now, I know you've gone through this a couple of times in the Facebook posts and whatnot, but I would like to hear, and my specific question is, these 2 students I want to put together, right? Yep. Obviously, they've got differences, as in their level, but not necessarily in the same skills. So, for example, one of them is really, really good at reading. She even went out and bought the PGM 2 and 3, and she's done, because she did music before. Whereas the other guy, he's starting. He's a real beginner in reading. So yeah. I guess in that specific example, how do you manage that sort of thing? Say, I'm trying to picture myself on the class that day. We're going through reading. How do you do it?
Okay. The first thing, which is often not thought of, is that you have to remain confident at all times, and you have to normalize the situation. So don't ever fear, if you start sort of showing that, oh, you don't know what you're doing, or, you know, oh, this doesn't feel right, then they start to lose confidence in you and the class and the whole thing. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it doesn't really matter the disparity between the 2 of them, so, or, you know, or more, for that fact. So if you've got some, you know, let's just take 2 students, for example. You've got one student who's, you know, halfway through the PGM, and you've got the other student who's only just starting on Song of Joy. So what do you do in that case? You do 2 things. Number one is you start where the lowest denominator is, and then the other is you start where the highest denominator is. So you kind of have these 2 areas. When you go to the lowest denominator, in other words, Song of Joy, what you're doing is you're setting that up for the beginner or the student who's at that level to be playing that song at whatever level that they can play it at. So you're working at their level. For the student who's more advanced, who, you know, for them that's too easy or maybe even boring, what you do is you up the ante for them somehow. So there are several ways to do it. For example, you could ask them to play that same song further up the neck. So they're not playing, you know, E, F, G on the first string. They're actually playing it up in 5th position. So that sort of sets a different bar for them. And knowing that that's coming, you can actually say to the more advanced student, I want you to learn the E, F, and G on the 2nd string now. You now know it on the 1st string. I want you to learn it on because you're going to be doing some of these basic reading exercises again, starting on that 2nd string. So that really helps them to move up and improves their reading, because as we know, most reading is not done down in open position. Most of the reading that you and I would do, or most, you know, intermediate to advanced guitarists do, is going to be further up the neck. So that's really where we want to go with it eventually anyway. So that's the other thing. But you can also up the ante for them by doing different things. So you could have one playing the chords while the other one's playing the notes. So the student who's more advanced could do the chords, and if the chords are even too easy for them, then what you can do is get them to, you know, if you want to take it sort of further up the extreme, is get them to play the chords and the melody. So they're combining the 2. And that may be a bit more challenging, but it's not impossible. It depends on the student and where they're at. But there's you know, you can create, give them a rhythm pattern that they have to do with the chords. you can get them doing, almost, you could get them doing a harmony even, if they're that kind of advanced. So there are, you understand what I'm saying? There are lots of things that can be done, and even for them to review those songs, like with for example, if I take Mia as an example, she's now past Molly Malone and onto the she's onto the A string basically. She's doing sort of like that. But I can still take it back to Song of Joy and some of those earlier tunes, and she's half forgotten them. She has to kind of get back to sort of, revising them. So it's still very good for her to go back over those earlier tunes because she hasn't touched on them for a while, and it keeps the notes coming in, and that's really what it's about. It's keep those notes keep coming in, and then she's aware of it. So if we go to the other side, which is the advanced student, and let's just say we go to Molly Malone and we're working on that. There's a song that's in 3/4. It's using more notes. Obviously, the students on Song of Joy is not going to be able to play that particular tune. But what they can do is, first of all, they could clap along to the rhythm. They could either just clap 1, 2, 3 the whole time, or they could clap on the actual beats in the song if it seems feasible. Or they could try and recognize as many notes as they could. In other words, as they're going along, as the song's being played, they could even just try and say whatever notes that are coming up. So this keeps them in that reading mode, it keeps them learning, but it actually helps them because the student who's sort of on the Song of Joy, what they will do is be more inclined to push ahead, to try and catch up, and they'll also learn things from just through observation, just through being there really, and watching what's going on. All right. So yeah, there's so many things you can do. It's really infinite, the number of possibilities that you can do with a group. And the thing that I say to any teacher who hasn't done group teaching is to think of it like a band, where you bring together different musicians playing different instruments, playing different notes, but all playing the same song. So it's the same idea. So if you're doing Molly Malone, you've got a drummer. The drummer's obviously not playing the guitar part. So this could be a percussive thing that your student who's not up to that yet can do. They can do kind of a percussive 3/4 on the rhythm, do some strumming. So they're involved and learning, but they're challenged at a level that they can handle. All right. Cool. We done?
Great.
All right. Excellent. One other thing that I'll say about groups is that what happens is afterwards is people sync. There's just this natural tendency for people to sort of move towards the middle, and that is that it might sound like a negative thing sometimes. You might think, well, you think your advanced students are going to be slowed down or pulled back because they're kind of waiting for these, and that's the common complaint or thought that people have, is that these students who are kind of advanced are going to get pulled back. But the reality is that the advanced students, they like their position, they like their pole position, and what they do is maybe at first, if there's a fair gap there, they relax a bit, but as soon as the student who's sort of coming up through the ranks is coming up to them and making any kind of progress on them, they start working harder. And this is what you're trying to do. It's not about where they're at, it's about the energy of the class and about the kind of idea that you set of these guys all pushing forward and all going away and doing the best that they can. It's not about whether they're better than that person. It's like a team idea. I take a lot of my ideas from coaches of sports teams, and they say most of the top coaches have very similar ideas. I talked about John Wooden before, and his philosophy was that it doesn't matter. Don't worry about the scoreboard. That was his philosophy. Don't look at the scoreboard. Don't worry about the scoreboard. Just go out and play the best game you can. What matters is that you give 100% when you're training and you give 100% when you're on the court. He's a basketball coach, but it doesn't matter the score. I don't care if you win or lose. It doesn't worry me. And he was quite honest about that. He was quite genuine about that. He didn't care whether they won or lose. All he cared about was whether they gave 100%. And if they went out there and gave 100% and lost, doesn't matter. Great, you did really well. But he held all the records. 88 games in a row or something they won. Massive, records that he broke in the US with the UCLA 18. So this is what you're looking at is that when you're working with your students and you're coaching them in groups, think of it like a team where all I care about is, if I look at you, Fernando, and I compare you to, say, Paul or Ben or, Rod, whatever, I'm not saying, hey, Fernando, Paul's doing much better than you. That's not what, that as a team, if I'm just thinking of us as a team, if I was in the position of a coach, that's not what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, Fernando, are you giving 100%? Great. That's all I care about. Paul, are you giving 100%? Yeah, great. That's all that matters. It doesn't matter that he's scoring more points than you, or he's a better player than you, or whatever. That's irrelevant. All that matters is that you're both giving 100%. All right. Cool. There's a lot of subtlety in group teaching. It's one of those things that as you do more, you'll get more and more experience doing it. But the more that I talk about it, the more I think about it, the more that I realize that these subtleties exist. And one of those subtleties, especially with kids, but it also applies to adults, unfortunately, is that there is competitiveness amongst people, and you as the teacher can either harness that in a positive way or a negative way. And the reality is that most teachers, and I'm talking group teachers, school teachers, coaches, whatever, they tend to lean towards the negative. Even parents do it, and they tend to play off people and go, look, this guy's working, he's better than you, or so this, and it can be in very subtle ways that we do it, and we have to be very aware that we're not doing that. So when you have your groups, you don't want to appear to be favoriting someone, giving them more attention, or giving them kind of extra yeah, you're doing really well, and kind of not acknowledging another student. Even if the other student, let's say you've got a couple of students and one student is not practicing, and that they're not putting in the effort, and this student works really hard, puts in the effort every week, looking good, and your kind of natural feeling is to think, this student here is working really hard. I want to just say it to everyone, dude, you're putting in a great effort, and over here, Johnny, you're just not cutting it, mate. You're not doing the work. So here I am, pushing this one up and putting this one down, and that is what we naturally often do. But what we've got to do is not do that at all, and to have this thing about where we're all playing together. We're all here together, and if Johnny over here, and let's say Mary over here, let's say Mary's doing lots of practice and doing really well, and Johnny's not practicing and not doing very well at all, the more that I keep saying that, the worse it actually gets. They end up becoming, the whole fulfilling the prophecy, if you like, of this. Johnny keeps going, getting worse and living up to his reputation, and Mary keeps working hard and living up to her reputation. What I've got to do is take the approach that we are a team, and I'm going to play all of you as part of this team. And so with Johnny, if Johnny's not doing a lot of practice, I'm not going to make a big deal in the class. I am going to talk to him, and I'm not going to ignore the issue. I make a big issue out of it, but to him, one-on-one, personally, I'll go up to him at the beginning of each group. Johnny, talk to me. What's going on? I'm really busy. I don't have time. Blah, blah, blah. Johnny, you know, and I know you can do this. I know how good you can be. The reason I put you in this class is because I know how good you can be. And I need you to do the practice for me. Can you do it for us? For you and me, can you do it for me? All right, okay. These are the kind of subtle conversations, or obvious conversations, not subtle, that you can have with students that will get them feeling good about themselves and are more likely to work. And the fact is that if it doesn't work, despite your efforts, the other is not going to work either. And so if that doesn't work and it gets to a point where your best efforts in a positive way are really not going to work, then what you need to do is just call it quits, and you need to say to the student or the parent, in this case if it was a kid, I would go to the parent and say, look, I've tried everything with Johnny, I've talked about everything, we've been over everything, I know he has great potential, I would love for Johnny to be able to continue, but he's not doing the practice, and I don't want to keep taking your money because it's unfair on you and unfair on him, and it's so I actually, funnily enough, rarely ever get to that because of what I do in preparation, and that's something I'm going to talk about in a minute. It's about that whole idea of being, prevention rather than cure. We don't want to be fixing problems all the time. If you find that you're constantly fixing problems, it means that you're not taking a preventative action. You know, related to something like health. If someone's getting sick a lot, having a lot of problems, you know, constantly colds and flus and all sorts of things, there's probably something else underlying that. Maybe they've got a lot of stress in their life, maybe they're not exercising, maybe they're not eating right. I'm not saying in every case, some people have obviously things that are just unfortunate, but as a general rule, people who get diabetes, as an example, most people who get diabetes, it's self-inflicted, it's something, it's through their diet, it's through their lifestyle that it ends up happening to them. So the same thing here is that we understand that the student has potential and the student can do it, and what we want to do is prevent these problems early on through what I'm going to talk about in a minute, which is preventative measures. So the subtlety of the groups, which it'll take time for you to learn this, and time for you to kind of, even for me to extract that out of me, because one of the things that I've really experienced it through this is that I'm digging deep to find all the little things that are not something that I've necessarily thought consciously about. And you guys will experience this with your guitar teaching, where you're saying to a student, just do this, and they're going, but it doesn't work for me. Yeah, well, come on, just do this, and this is how it is. But it doesn't happen for me. And you don't know how to express the feeling. You're saying it's got to have that feeling. You got to have that touch. And they go, but I do. I don't know what you're talking about. It's like, I remember my teacher, as a teenager, teaching me jazz, and he said, Dave, it's too bright for jazz. It's not the sound. Well, I don't know. What is the sound? What is the jazz sound? I didn't know. And he kept telling me, it's not quite right, Dave. You've got to, and he set my guitar up and my amp, and that's a jazz sound. And I go home and I couldn't remember what the sound was. So this is the kind of thing that even me with you guys as a coach, and slowly getting across, slowly working out what's the best way I can get this across to you. And that's why, if you have listened to the podcast that I recorded yesterday, I talked about the whole idea of building confidence in your students, and the fact that this is really the main job of what we do as teachers. What we really want to do is keep their confidence up, because the number one reason that they give up, and all the excuses and all the problems you have, are related to confidence almost all the time. And that's the thing that people mostly miss. Okay? Make sense? All good? Yep. Okay, great. Now, does anyone questions? We'll dive into the last portion of this. No questions? Okay, great. All right. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to talk about two things. One thing is just touching on the parents and the fact that I know that some of you guys have had the challenge of where parents are sort of saying this, and we've talked about this before, but we'll touch on it just a few minutes. And that is where parents are saying that, hey, I don't want to force my child. I don't want, if they don't want to practice, or if they don't enjoy the guitar, I'm not going to push it beyond that. And the problem, of course, is the parent doesn't really get the fact that their kid is not going to want to practice. Very few kids do. It's just something that, if we come back to that, and this is where that book that I was talking about really hit home for me, and it was the book I told you about, where he said, passion, following your passion is not the key to success. And where this comes in, or where this plays in here, is that it's when we actually get good at guitar, then we start to get those skills on the guitar, that the passion comes. What happens a lot of the time for us as teenagers, and the reason a lot of teenagers take up guitar, is because their passion is for music, not necessarily playing guitar. Their passion is for the music, and that was for me. I was passionate about the bands, Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and AC/DC, and I was passionate about the bands. Practice, not so much. I wasn't that passionate about the practice. I kind of just wished it would do what it needed to do. I didn't want to go through it. If someone said, "Here's a pill, just take it, and you'll be the next, Eddie Van Halen at that time," I would have thought, great, give me the pill, I'll pay you whatever it costs. But that we don't realize, or parents, don't realize that their kids, that even if they're passionate about the music, they're not passionate about the guitar practice itself. That comes once they build confidence, and once they their fingers start to move, and once they can sound like something, and it starts to sound good and feel good to them, that's when the confidence comes in. I think it was Paco Penna who said, that guitar's, 95% perspiration and 5% inspiration, and that really sums it up. And I would often say that to parents, is that this is mostly perspiration. It's mostly hard work. That's what guitar is. But the joy, that 5%, is totally worth it. But to get that 5%, you've got to put in the 95%. That's unfortunately just how it is. And so when you say to parents, look, Johnny or Mary, or 1 in 100, if that, maybe 1 in 500 or 1 in 1,000, will pick up the guitar and just practice. A 6-year-old kid picks up the guitar and just practices, never has to be asked, always in their room doing. That's the rare kid. It does happen, of course, but it's the rare situation. And there's a great book, if you want to have a read of it, called Bounce. And what it is, it's all about the guy. He was an Olympic table tennis player from the UK, and he talked about how the premise of the whole book was a study that he did, which was all about how successful sports people, who especially young, they started as kids, how they became successful, and their success came mostly from their circumstances, not from their passion. Which again comes back to that whole thing. Someone like Tiger Woods didn't just, he wasn't born and then said, "Dad, I want to play golf. That's all I want to do." His father introduced him to golf. His father taught him to play golf. He spent time with him. He did everything. He uses examples of the Williams sisters, the tennis players, Venus and Serena, and how the father had already, before they were even born, decided that they were going to be tennis players. He decided that he wanted something, a sport that had a lot of money, and he actually didn't decide before they were born that they were going to be tennis players. He decided before they were born that they were going to be something remarkable in sport, but he was hoping for boys, but he got girls, and so he chose a sport where girls make the most money, and the top paying sport for girls is tennis. That's why he chose tennis. That was the only reason. It was a monetary decision.
I'll just interrupt there on that one, David.
Yeah, go, Paul.
On that anecdote, the Williams sisters have 4 older siblings, and the dad taught the first 4, and they gave it up. It was the youngest 2 that worked hard and kept going with his sister. Okay. That's
it. I remember that. I couldn't remember how many there were, but yeah, exactly. There were. The father was determined to produce some successful tennis players. And you can understand it. You can even go back to Mozart. Mozart. Again, a lot of people don't realise that his name was Leopold, the father of Amadeus, and he had a daughter who was actually potentially as good, if not better, than Mozart. She was arguably going to be better. She just didn't go on with it because at that time women didn't do that. What they did is they got married, and they got married young. She was married, I think, in her teens. She was married as a young teen. So, and her job was to be a wife. Once she was married, that was it. It was all done. So that, when you sort of look at these stories and you go into them, you realize how much of a circumstance. And the one last thing that I'll talk about on that is that the guy who wrote the book, I think his name is Matthew Syed, S-Y-E-D. He was a journalist as well in the UK, sports journalist. What he spoke about is there's actually one street in the UK that produced half of the UK's Olympic table tennis players. Half came from one street in the UK. And the UK actually, after China and maybe Taiwan and a couple of other countries, actually used to do very well. I don't know how they do these days, but they used to do very well in table tennis. It was one of the sports the UK did well at the Olympics. So they did produce a lot of table tennis players, and most of them came from this area. And the one last thing that I'll throw on that is he talked about the guy who was the best. He was considered he came from the same area, but he came from very poor existence, and he had to practice on a table tennis table that was backed up against the wall. So in other words, there wasn't a lot of room for him to get back. So he learned to play a very short, fast game. and that gave him an advantage. Again, it was circumstance that put him in that situation. Anyway, it's a great book. It's called Bounce, and if you can have a read of that, it'll give you a lot of insight. And reading these kind of books and understanding this kind of stuff really helps you when it comes to talking to parents and realizing that parents are not understanding the full picture, that they have the potential to really help their children succeed on guitar if they want. It's not about forcing them any more than it's about forcing them to eat vegetables or eat healthy or to, brush their teeth or go to bed. Or there's a certain amount of persuasion involved, and there are ways that you can do it positively, and you certainly go for them. But you guys have seen Mia, a video, heard it several times, and she has bad days. She has days, I don't want to do this, I hate it, I'm bored. She has those days, but we still do it anyway. But 4 out of the 5 days, she loves it. She's fine. She's good with it. I would say one day she really is into it, and she's great. She's just pumped about it because she feels really confident. 3 days, she's okay with it. She'll go along with it. And one day she has, a bad day. So that's about par for the course. But what happens is parents have that one bad day, and they're thinking, this is all too hard. And I hate this, I don't want to do this. And so the parent goes, well, that's it. We're not doing it anymore. We won't push it. And so, but the parent, what the kid learns, and this I guess is the main point, is the kid learns that by chucking a tantrum, then they get out of it, and then they can go back to watching TV or whatever that they're more inclined to do. So when the parent is inconsistent, then the child then learns to use that as a manipulation to get out of what they do, and that's where you'll see children. All children throw tantrums. All children have bad days. That's normal. But what happens is that when they do it routinely, and they get what they want, they get rewarded for that behavior, then they'll continue to do it. So if parents don't understand this, then what we need to do is kind of try and help them to understand it. And the best way to do that is to do it before rather than after, because if you do it after, it comes across like preaching. It comes across like you're trying to tell them how to be a good parent. And whereas if you do it before, and it's all like, no judgment here. I don't know what kind of parent you are. I'm sure you're great. I'm sure you do a wonderful job as a parent. But hey, let me talk a bit about how kids learn music. Not talking about how kids general. I'm just talking about kids, how they learn music, and then I'm using these examples. And you'll see some parents who go, oh, okay, and other parents go, yeah, totally with you on that one. I totally get you. Yep, no, we'll be doing the practice, no problem. And I had very few problems because of the fact that I would raise this conversation early. I would make it part of my routine to really get parents to understand at the beginning how it all works and the dynamics of it. Okay, and they'd often come back with statements like, "You've been doing this for a while, haven't you?" And, yes, I have. So that's what you want. Is you want parents to see you as the expert that you are, because it doesn't take long for you to become an expert. First of all, you're being trained. We're going through this process. But the other thing is that you're observing parents and children all the time. This is your job. You're doing it every day. So you get to know the dynamics. The difference, and I'm sort of I'm very grateful for this, for what I've had in the years of experience that I had. I got to observe parents and children of all different types. All, so many thousands of parents and children in action. I got to see all the different ways that they interacted, and I got to see what some parents did and worked, and what they did, what didn't work, and the way children, responded to certain behaviours and didn't respond, and all these different kind of scenarios. And so it was really like a long research project, and I was very fortunate to be able to do that. And that's what, it took a while, but then I started to see the patterns, and I started to see what worked and what didn't work, what made a student successful and what didn't. And so then it became part of my teaching. It became really about educating parents on how to work with their children to succeed. And the fact is that even though a lot of parents, they're sensitive about it, you have to be careful in your delivery, most parents don't have the training. They don't have any parent training. They don't have a manual, or they didn't do a university degree in how to work with children and how to raise children. So they do what they know best, and they do what their parents show them, or what they kind of pick up from friends and family. And unfortunately, that would be like you getting one of your friends to do your legal work for you. or getting them to do surgery on you. Do you want your cousin Joe to do your heart operation, or would you prefer to go to a surgeon who really knows what they're doing? I know what I would prefer. And so this is what needs to happen with parenting as well. People who have had a lot of experience around children and parents and seen that in action. And believe it or not, private music teachers or music teachers that operate out of schools, if you like, are actually in one of those rare privileged positions where we see it more than anybody else. If you think about school teachers don't see the parent a lot. They see the kids, but they don't see the interaction between the parent and the child, which is critical for understanding the way that a child, because I'll take Mia, for example. Mia at school, they talk about her as, she's the perfect student, she's a model student, blah, 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 blah. Then she comes home and gives her mum a hard time. But that's because she lets loose at home, and she's not that bad, but she's more relaxed and has a different kind of way at home and a different way of doing things. But at school, she behaves in a different way. So the teacher's not actually seeing the dynamic between Mia and myself, or Mia and her mother. So she doesn't really know what's going on behind the scenes. So this is where you guys are in a privileged position. Even after a year of teaching, if you're teaching 2 or 3 days a week for a year, you will have more knowledge about parenting than 99% of parents, and that's just the way it is. So yeah, really soak it up, and also it's your career. So the relationship between a child and a parent is really going to be the deciding factor in whether or not you succeed as a teacher of children. Anyway, okay. So I'm going to wrap up the last part of this, and there wasn't many questions tonight, but that's cool. You can always throw me some questions next time. Now, so the last part of this is what I've talked about before, but it's one of those things that I'll keep saying again and again, and that's the prevention. That most of your problems come from not being in a kind of a more preventative way of doing things. So in other words, the problem happens and then you try and solve it, rather than assuming the problem will happen and preparing for it beforehand. And most problems, let me use an example that most people can relate to, and I think you've all known people, if you haven't been guilty of it yourself, of people who are always broke, never have any money, all right? And then an emergency crops up, and suddenly they're ringing friends or family or trying to get someone to borrow some money off so they can pay for this emergency, whatever it is. And this person, the first time, especially if they're a relative or someone you care about, sure, here's some money, I'm glad to help you out. But then, a month later, 2 months later, same thing. What happened? Back again. Oh, I'm really strapped at the moment. I'm really trying to keep up. And then this person, you can see this pattern that they're always broke, and that's because they're not actually preparing for any of these future problems or expenses. And it happens in business more than anywhere. But the fact that they're not thinking about potential problems, and this is a kind of a really for you guys as well in business, not preparing for things that are going to happen, then you end up fighting fires all the time. You end up having to deal with problems again and again and again. So if you take a more preventative approach to your teaching in the same way, in other words, assume, it's like the old saying of hope for the best, expect the worst. So assume that the students are not going to practice, that they're not going to want to continue after their intro, that they're going to want to drop out anytime soon. Keep assuming that, and that's going to happen, and keep being proactive about ensuring that doesn't happen, that you're actually taking action each and every day, all the time, to constantly make sure that you're on top of the problems that happen. So when I see, things come up, and again, let me make this clear that I want you to put the things on Facebook, and I want you to tell me what problems you have, questions, don't hold them back. Because that's worse. If you sort of say, I don't want to say this because Dave will think that I haven't been doing the preventative measures, that's worse. It's better to speak about it and then us talk about it. But when you see what I do is really almost like a reverse engineer the problem and say, okay, the problem is that you've got, say, I don't know, one of you posted today or yesterday about a student who said they can't afford it now. You know, they'll finish January, but after that they're going to stop because they can't afford it. So what you want to do is go back and see, did you miss something? Was there some sign not that you didn't catch on to that could have been done to prevent that? Now you might say no, you did everything possible. I'm not saying that you're going to do it in every case, and that particular person may have been fine last year. You know, now suddenly something's happened over Christmas. And even though they say it's their personal circumstances, which in this case I think it was Ben maybe said it, but even though they're saying that, how have they got in that situation that they now have to cancel their guitar lessons, something that they decided to take up, decided to do and commit to? Why is it now that they're suddenly stopping it? Because you know, they're having to cut back financially, and that's because it was a priority that was lower down the scale. Because we know the cost in the UK, you know, £15 here, it's, you know, $25. It's not a lot of money. You know, that same person, if they just worked an extra hour at work, or you know, they just cut back on something else that they probably don't need, then it would, you know what I mean? It would make they would be able to afford it, no problem. It's just that it's a priority, so they're probably having to save, you know, $100 a week or $200 a week, whatever they've got on their budget, and they're just looking at the things, oh, I can do without that, I can do without that, I can do without that. But there are certain things, and they're probably still going to be over their budget anyway. There's certain things they're not going to cut back on. So by having that preventative take on things, will really eliminate any of those problems. Okay, cool. So does anybody have any last questions, comments, or are we done? Very quiet.
I have one thing about the preventing, David.
Yes, Ben, go.
I'm trying to keep it in mind all the time, but I always feel slightly apprehensive about saying it in front of the students. Specifically saying, there will be a time where a student won't want to practice. Do I want to do that in front of them, or should you generally try and wait until you're just alone with the parent, or maybe a phone call or something?
That's a great question. It's one of those things that you have to be careful about, because it can come across the wrong way.
You don't want to give them permission to.
Yeah, it's almost like you kind of setting them up, saying, look, you're going to want to quit, so you know, don't even bother wasting your money now. You know, it can easily come across the wrong way. But what you want to do is say, look, you know, on average, and this is the way that I would typically say. I would say things like, on average, people want to quit. You know, on average, something like, you know, 80% of people will end up quitting within the first 3 to 6 months of taking up guitar. And the reasons are not because they don't want to do it. They really do want to do guitar. And so what I like to do, and one of the things and I sort of, you know, turn it around and say, the reason my students don't quit is because I talk about this up front. And I'm not saying that you want to quit or you'll want to quit. You're very likely going to be in the 20% who there's no chance of you quitting. You're absolutely 100% committed. But what I want to do is just touch on it, just to make sure, because just by talking about it, I know that we're going to dramatically reduce any chances of that happening. And I might say that obviously if I'm talking to an adult student, but then if it's a parent, I'll say it to the parent, look, what's going to happen is that there's a good chance that, you know, in 3 or 4 weeks he won't want to do the practice. He'll find it hard. He'll find this instance. So what I want to do is prepare you for that, because it doesn't mean he doesn't want to play guitar. He really will still want to play guitar. He just will go through these stages. And what I, you know, with parents, I often say it's just a stage. They go through stages where sometimes they want to do it and sometimes they don't. So I just want to make you aware of it and let you know that you can talk to me anytime about it, because that's the easiest way. When he goes through or she goes through those periods of where she doesn't want to practice, talk to me, because I've done this many times, and I'll be able to work you through it. All right.
Cool. Thanks.
It's at the end of the day, it's all about keeping it positive. Everything that you want to do is deliver in a positive way that you're doing this. You know, it's a bit like the doctor going, look, we have to do surgery, but hey, it's a day. will be done, and you'll be back to full health within a couple of weeks. It's all good. Trust me, you're on good. So it's not news we want to hear, but it's that the doctor's delivering it in a positive way with a positive outcome. It's all going to be good, and that's the same kind of you want to deliver it in a positive way, but at the same time being honest and realistic with them. So,
yeah.
The last thing on that, from a business point of view for you guys, it would be like me saying to you, hey guys, just pay me lots of money and you'll make lots of money and it'll all be good. And then you get into your flyers, and you know that I say this and I put it in the literature that I do, is that you won't want to do the flyers a lot of the time. A lot of the time it'll feel like hard work, but that's the difference. That's what will make you successful to all the other teachers who don't do that. All right? So I'm upfront about the fact that it's not going to be your most enjoyable time of the day, but you can make it enjoyable. We've talked about this, listening to audios and thinking of it as exercise, and really looking at the benefits of the fact that you're walking, you're getting exercise, you're learning through your iPod, and you're building your business. And that's when you know that you're on the right track, when you really are out there doing something that's good for your business, but also is good for you and that you want to do. And that's, if you can do that. People go jogging and do exercise and they pay to do it. Where you guys are getting paid to do it, so nothing better. All right, guys, we're done. Unless anyone's got any last comments. All good. Signing off. Yep. Okay. Thanks, guys. Good talking to you. Good seeing you. And just so you guys know, I'm going to Japan in 2 weeks. They're having record snowfalls. It's freezing cold, so don't know how I'll handle that here from the tropics. But I'll still be available, of course, always via my trusty internet. So yeah, just letting you know that I'll be relocating in a couple of weeks. Okay, thanks, guys. See you later.